I don't usually work on Sundays, but I needed some extra cash, so I took an early shift, and then I came home at around 2 p.m. I live in this apartment building. My apartment is on the first floor, along with another one that belongs to this dude who's rarely home. There's Miss Rogue's place on the ground floor, and then the second floor has two other flats, one owned by an elderly couple, and the other by his family I don't really see that often. Directly above me, sometimes I hear the kids in the morning complain about having to get ready for school and then stomping down the stairs. Sometimes I hear hushed voices and dishes clattering. After 10 p.m., everything usually goes quiet. I got to my door and, as I was searching for my keys in my bag, I could hear voices upstairs. They were hushed and a little tense, stressing the words and mixing them together. I couldn't really make out what they were saying, but they seemed to be talking about something really important. Now keep in mind that I've never seen these people before. I assumed they were family because I kept hearing the kids and sounds that I generally attribute to a family home. It's not like I've personally met them. Anyways, as I said, I finally got a hold of my keys and unlocked the door, yet I didn't immediately step inside after I opened it. I don't know why I let it swing open and remained there listening for 2 more seconds, but I'm somewhat glad that I did. The moment the door was heard, the voices upstairs stopped. Completely. As if they were listening to me now. I remained still. We all studied the silence for a while. I heard a singular step on the stairs above. That's when my back went cold and my muscles tensed up, for whatever reason. I got the sudden urge to just go inside and shut the door behind me, which I did. Afterwards, I started putting some groceries in the fridge and doing some errands around the house. Faintly at first, then stronger, I started hearing this birthday song upstairs. I smiled inside. They were planning the birthday. That's why they were so precautious, so nervous. It sounded like there were around 5 to 6 people singing, maybe. Happy birthday, dear Jonah. That was cute. When they finished, they started again. I did find it weird, but I assumed that the kid had asked for it again. Kids love blowing out candles and whatever. It was an awfully long song. It kept looping until reaching its conclusion, just like the first time. It had a lot of unnecessary runs and filler, and extra lyrics. When they finished, a little pause followed. Then they started again, in the exact same way. Fucking weird family, I thought to myself. And by that time I had started to get annoyed, so I put on my headphones and laid down on the couch. I fell asleep at around 4 or 5 p.m. I woke up from the nap disoriented. Man, after work naps hit the hardest. I'd slept until around 8 p.m., and the sun was peeking at me from behind some buildings, a sunset that was more blue than red, a melancholy and confusion that reminded me of how liminal your house felt when you would go to sleep after school and wake up with a sore throat and a huge pillow mark on your face. With your mood ruined, your mother suddenly calling you out to go to dinner. I swallowed, staring blankly at the window, highlighted in golden rum. I rubbed my eyes, then massaged my face. I stood up to get a glass of water, walked barefoot to the kitchen, which was now sunken in that specific 8 p.m. darkness, and stood still and silent, not knowing what I wanted from my life. Then, I finally registered one important detail. The folks upstairs were still singing happy birthday. I listened for a while, unsure of what my reaction should be. I wondered if they had some recording playing on a loop, but that really wasn't the case, as each version sounded differently from the previous. They really were just weird. Or maybe their kid was just eccentric. Maybe they were just practicing for some performance? I started thinking. As I said, I hadn't personally met these people before, so I had no idea what they did. Maybe they really were just practicing. I put my headphones on and went on trying to make some sort of dinner, even though I wasn't really hungry and my throat was still sore. I ate, watched my show, then took a shower. Their singing had started to piss me off. It was now approaching 10 p.m., and I felt the need to go upstairs and tell them to quit it. I'm not confrontational. I really don't like telling people that they upset me, and most don't have the appropriate reaction at all. I didn't want to talk to them, so I called my mom. I started telling her about my day, but she interrupted, asking about the people upstairs. Yeah, they've been doing it for hours. I don't know. It's starting to really get on my nerves.
Well, go up to them and knock. Aren't the other residents annoyed? The old people upstairs? I'm sure they wanted to sleep by now.
Maybe I could just put on some music. That could cover them up.
But do you want to listen to music?
No, not really.
Then why do it to please them? Go upstairs, Michaela.
I sighed and reluctantly agreed. After hanging up, I put on a sweater and unlocked my front door. The moment I opened it, the air felt a little colder, illuminated by the ray of light from my door and another faint light coming from upstairs. I then went up the stairs. The second floor was more animated than the first. The door to the family's apartment was slightly open, and I could see light and movement behind. I slowly approached it, and then I peeked inside. I could see a hallway with balloons and confetti peacefully floating around. A faint smell of candles and sweetness lingered out. I didn't want to disturb too much, so I tried to be discreet while I quietly and almost imperceptibly pushed the door slightly more. The small hallway made way to the dining room. The shadows were dancing on the walls as people clapped around the table and sang. On the table was a cake with pink and purple frosting, sprinkles and some writing I really couldn't decipher. The song carried on, but was hoarser than I remembered it. People were smiling, swaying from side to side at the person sitting in front of the cake. The lighting was dim and pleasant, its only source being the candles. The people around were a little tense, but overall it reminded me of my own birthdays as a kid. Some boxes lay scattered on the floor. I tried to take a better look at them, or at least the kid. The child looked like a young boy, with a big birthday hat on. He, I think, could have been 10 or 12, and his face was round and stretched into a big smile. I stared at his teeth for a while. I don't know what prompted me to make that observation, but he had adult teeth, which were rotten and yellow, sticking out of his mouth in abnormal directions. His eyes were wide and red, as if he'd been crying for a while. I don't remember seeing him blink at all. In the minutes that I watched that felt like hours, he looked really shaken and tense. I'd never seen a child like that before, never in my life. All the courage I had before peeking through the door had evaporated. I must have zoned out watching the scene when I was pulled away from my trance. The kid shifted his eyes from the candles, which had now almost completely melted, and looked straight at me. I felt seen like I'd never been seen before. My heart completely collapsed, leaving a painful knot in my chest as I made eye contact with the child. His smile slowly faded, turning into a grimace. I wanted to run, but I was somehow frozen in place. Suddenly, he blew out the candles, and the room was engulfed in darkness. I heard someone shuffle in the dark towards me, gasped, and shut the door behind me as I practically jumped down the stairs. The shuffling and scratching followed. I gripped the door and slammed it behind me just as something slammed into it from the other side. Eyes wide and unfocused, I barely managed to lock it as the banging started. The song upstairs had stopped. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was completely dark now, but I could make out the details of a face I'd looked at before in the dimly lit dining room. Only, now we were at eye level, which was impossible, since they had been a kid. Had it? Or had it just been a person? The more I thought, the more I realized I had no idea what prompted me to assume it had been a kid. The round face? The childish clothing? Trying to decipher the memory meant analyzing every detail of that horrible face. A thing I didn't want to do. The banging turned to scratching. I yelled I was going to call the police. My voice died in my throat. The banging was so strong that it was undoubtedly going to break the door. Suddenly, I heard a distinct sound upstairs. The banging and scratching instantly stopped. It was a door opening. The elderly couple's door. "Hey! What on earth are you doing? It's in the middle of the night." I watched through the people as the kid, or whatever he was, walked away from my door upstairs. Quit it before I call the police. It's enough that I have to hear your kid's tantrums every day, lady. The voice abruptly stopped. I listened. Barely breathing. No scream. No sound. Nothing. Faint scratching, then shuffling. Then a faint cry that sounded more like forced sobs. I silently dialed up the police, and I barely managed to whisper what was going on, afraid that I might be heard. As I was detailing the problem, I looked through the people once again to be greeted by that face. Grimaced, eyes bloodshot and sunking into his head. "You're welcome to join next year. That's why we left the door open," came the voice of an adult, out of the face of a 12-year-old. I gasped and ducked, as if it would save me. The police came in around half an hour, which was an insanely long amount of time. They went upstairs and sealed off the entirety of the second floor. They refused to give me details. I had to wait for the headlines and accept some vague answers from the numerous phone calls I'd given since. "Miss, there were never kids living upstairs. 2 of them were grown-ups, but 2 of them were pretending to be kids." They refused to tell me what happened to the elderly couple. They barely mumbled something that included kidnapping, massacre, and disembowelment. Some of the victims, which had been many, were hostages, made to play along. The presents were just pieces of flesh, toys made of bones with bows on them. One of them was a teeth necklace. I'm going through a really hard time now, trying to move all my stuff without having to go to that place too often. I've tried to sell it or even rent it out, but honestly, I just can't. Maybe I need to sell it to some true crime fanatic. I moved in with my parents. I asked them to add extra locks to their doors and windows and security cameras everywhere. They assumed I was paranoid and suffering from PTSD. I let them believe that. However, I'd watched the security footage of that night, showing the outside of my door. The birthday boy I'd spoken to hadn't gone back upstairs. He just crawled to the window and jumped out. I don't know where he is now, but I hope it goes both ways. Hey everyone. If you enjoyed the narration, hit the like, sub to the channel, and leave a comment about what stories you'd like me to narrate. Also, if you are a writer, send me your stories to my email, and maybe you can see them featured on the channel. Have a good night.